Peace, bro. How you doing? It's your brother Mikey Fever. Welcome to another episode of NYP Talk Show, the most coolest, realest platform within this conscious space. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. We got super chats. We have merch. Join the family. Show your support. Tell a friend and tell a friend. And tonight we got a great show for you. Tonight we got Morio Smith L, who will be talking about the early Moorish presence in the Americas. How you doing, my brother?
Man, I'm doing good, brother. Always glad to be on you guys' show, New York Talk Perspective podcast.
Oh, no.
Correct? Yes,
Yeah,
sir. So,
definitely.
yes,
Yeah,
sir. So
definitely.
always glad to be on you guys' podcast. I want to give honors and praises, honors to my Father God. Praises to my Father God Allah. Honors to Noble Drew Ali, the Prophet, Marcus Garvey, the Harbinger. My leadership keep there in the jail. So I just wanted to get that out the way so we could jump right into it.
No doubt. Hold on. Let's get props to that. Let's light that up real quick. Definitely, brother. So with this show tonight, brother, I want you to just go right into it, man. Let us know, man. Tell us about the early Moorish presence in America, man.
Yeah, so before we even get to the PowerPoint, I just kind of want to just outline everything, why I can still, see everything. Um,
Right.
the early Moorish presence in America, right? Could be definitely talked about in pre-Islamic times, ancient times, etc. But what we mainly want to focus on with this presentation is understanding that when the Spanish and the Portuguese got the opportunity to explore explore the Americas, discover the Americas,
Yeah.
create that system of slavery and imperialism in the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
What basically was the ghost or underlying system of their empire was a Moorish slash Sephardic network. So what do
Mm.
I mean by that? I mean the knowledge that it took as
Yeah.
far as nautical and navigational tools, maps, uh, just the skill of shipbuilding with inventions like the caravel, just again, knowledge of the seas and things like that. A lot of that was based in the culture of Moorish Spain.
Yeah.
Right? So then, so how they got there, underpinned the network of Moorish knowledge. And then once they got there, right, the translators who translated, it was always known, it was a known thing that Moorish people were multilingual and knew several different languages
I
due
heard
to
that before.
trade and just civilizational building. So
Mm-hmm.
language and translating was also a key thing. And then you also want to look at like the actual uh, economic engine of the transatlantic slave trade, right?
Yeah.
Looking at what were the cash crops? Cotton, sugar, indigo, rice, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are basically the cash crops of the transatlantic slave trade. But again, it was Moorish, Iberian, Sephardic agricultural knowledge that was basically the backbone of the Spanish Portuguese Iberian colonial project. So the logistics of how Spain and Portugal became empires, and then the French, the English, and the Dutch, they would then basically take over this knowledge network for themselves, and basically end up cutting uh, Spain and Portugal out the pie. So this is kind of like the direction that the slideshow is going to take. So I just wanted to
Okay.
clear that up before we jumped into it, because I know Moore's be like, we've been in the Americas forever. Like, I understand that, but I
Yeah.
just want to look at the importance of even us understanding uh, Spanish, Portuguese, British, French, Dutch colonial expansionist history, understanding that a lot of what they did was born out of a Moorish network knowledge base.
Got you. So with that being said, from the year 700, 711 to 1492, correct me if I'm wrong, with the fall of Granada in Spain and everything else.
Yes,
the slave trade came about. That's something I have to many where they're saying like that transatlantic slave trade. Not every um African came from Africa itself. We're not shipped from Africa. There's some of them came from Spain. And later, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? And they went from Spain to what we know as modern day Dominican Republic and Haiti, Hispaniola, right?
indeed, 100%. So a lot of people came directly straight from Spain to the Americas. Um,
Yeah.
Unwillingly as well as willingly.
Yeah.
Understanding that, right? Like one of Christopher Columbus's pilot, um, I think his name is Alfonso Nino.
Hmm.
He was basically what they called at that time a Morisco, but somebody who had converted to Catholicism,
Yeah.
with Moorish blood lineage, right? So even him getting there before you even bring slaves over, the Moors were at the point of first contact for the Europeans discovering America.
Yeah. Perfect. Though. That's a fact. Cause man, many years, many moons ago, I did some research on that, and I was like, oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like um, they were the Hebrew speaking Moors that came over with Columbus to translate, as they say, because we were very multilingual
Hmm.
individuals. And that when I went over to Puerto Rico, I know this is all gonna make me go all over the place, but I went to Puerto Rico and they had like a statue of the 12 tribes, and they were
Hmm.
saying like many of them came here with something to pick referencing the 12 tribes of Israel. But that's a whole other conversation we
Yeah,
can get into.
the translator who we're going to talk about, Luis de Torre, I believe he has a synagogue named after him in the Caribbean.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if it's not in, I don't remember the exact country it's in just off the top of my head, but I believe it's between either Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic and maybe Barbados or something like that. But yeah, there is a synagogue named after him in the Caribbean.
All right, that's peace. We'll get into that. So, brother, can you show us that presentation that you got that you're about to get into?
Share my screen.
And for those that will be viewing this video, don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe, keep it respectful, and enjoy. Take notes.
Indeed.
Create dialogue in the chat in the comment section. All right, brother got the presentation for us. Here we go.
Yeah. So,
Boom. All right, go ahead.
yes, sir. Get get my notes, sir. All right. So, early Moorish presence in the Americas, a distributed Atlantic continuity. So, today I'm going to challenge how we typically understand the origins of the Atlantic world. We often think in neat boxes: Spanish colonies, British colonies, Portuguese territories. But history is messier and much more connected. I'm going to argue
Yep.
that the foundation of the Atlantic world wasn't built by empires alone, but by pre-existing shared system of knowledge that have been developing for centuries in the Iberian Peninsula, and that system was carried across the ocean by people whose identities were complex, layered, and often hidden.
Mm.
All right. All right. So, thesis: what we're seeing in history is not separate imperial histories, but a shared Atlantic system built on overlapping knowledge networks from the Islamic, Iberian, African, and Indigenous networks that shaped everything from agriculture to social hierarchies. This system
Mm.
was operational before Columbus and continued to function beneath the official structures empire for centuries. Right. So again, on the outside, it's looking like Spain is doing these things, Portugal is doing these things, the British are doing these things. But
Yeah.
underground, right, is really still the knowledge base of these uh, converted, forced converted Catholics who used to be Muslims and
Yeah.
Jews, and enslaved African Muslims and enslaved traditional African religious following Africans as well.
Got you. I have heard of that before.
Yeah.
A lot of, like they were forced religious conversions were forced upon the people where Islam as we know it in the past when the Moors had it, they were very accepting. But when the Catholics came, they came with the rulership under was it I don't want to get it mixed up, but under a certain rulership of Pope who
Is
was very
Isabella Ferdinand, the
yes,
Queen of Spain?
yes.
About
And
that.
it was forcibly put upon the people to convert. If not, they will face death. And
Yeah,
they were taking away their land and resources and stuff like that, their riches, family emblems, and all that stuff. So yeah.
definitely. So immediately after the capitulation of Granada, um, people who were of Jewish descent, so Sephardic descent, uh,
Hmm.
in Andalusia were immediately expelled. Right, so they either had to convert or be expelled, or like you said, fate, run the risk of death. It wasn't until 10 years later, in
Mm.
1502, that the Kingdom of Castile enforced uh, forced conversion to Catholicism for Muslims. And it wasn't until 1522 that her husband's territory, Aragon, they started to force Muslims to convert as well. So immediately the Jews were expelled, and then 10 and 20 to 30 years afterwards, depending on the territory that you lived in, Muslims were
Hmm.
forced to convert as well.
I'm
Right?
glad you put context to that. Thank you, brother.
Of course. So again, I was talking about knowledge networks. So systems that shape these empires were agriculture, trade, navigation, and social organization. Right. So
Yeah.
agriculture, the hydraulic engineering, crop
Mm.
rotation, specific cultivation of rice, sugar, and citrus fruits. Right. This knowledge came from Moorish Spain. Navigation, astrolabes, the caravel ship design, the knowledge of Atlantic currents and wind patterns also came from Moorish Spain.
Mm.
Trade, the commercial routes, the credit systems, the merchant networks spanning the Mediterranean and West Africa also came from Moorish Spain. So when you look at, there's a book called Africa versus America. And in
Yeah.
Africa versus America, it basically talks about how the elite of Spain and Portugal were hiding cartographical knowledge, basically hiding older maps that alluded to the Americas, for monopoly over the trade.
Yeah.
Like this was like real important that they basically kept trade secrets, which also stems from Moorish culture as well, because we kept trade secrets for centuries. Uh,
Yeah.
Depending on what the trade was, and that's why a lot of trades, right, have like initiations and rituals and things like that, because
Yeah.
you know all of that was the economy, the religion, the social network, all of that was kind of seen as one,
Yeah.
right, from a more holistic perspective.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So then you have language, right?
Yeah.
Lingua francas like Sabir, a Mediterranean dialect, Arabic derived navigational terms, multilingual translators, like we talked about, which we'll get more into, and then social organization. So urban planning, legal frameworks like Islamic water rights adapted in the Americas, system
Yeah.
slavery, manumission, etc. Right.
Like
So
maritime
basically,
law.
maritime law. So
Gotcha.
basically, like the logistics needed for these different European countries to sustain their empire, a lot of it was an inheritance from the Moorish Empire falling in Europe.
But I believe that. I know that because it was the Moors that civilized Europe.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they were still in barbaric way of living. They know not to be disrespectful, that they didn't understand the concept of proper hygiene and seasoning of food, and we brought over the mathematics to them, astrology, science of astrology and agriculture, even till the days of America with the almanac. Was a Moorish person, Benjamin Banneker, bought that for them.
Yes, sir.
It- Um, Before we go further, I'd like to know how far did the Moorish Empire extend it? Because we know about North Africa and Morocco, but how far did the Moorish Empire extend?
Um, Depending on what time,
Hmm.
depending on what time and era, and depending on which dynasty, right? So you're
Yeah.
talking about like straight political control, right? You're talking about
Territorial. Yeah.
territorial control. You talk about as far as Senegal, far south of Senegal, and as
Mhm.
far south as Timbuktu and Mali. All
All
right.
right.
You're talking about direct political control. Now, if you're talking about just the Moorish, and then as far west to Egypt, right?
Mhm.
But if you're talking about network, the network that the Moor, meaning that like people that were directly a part of the Moorish administrative, system,
Yeah.
as far as like traders and things like that, that network extended all the way south into Ghana, Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ivory Coast, all of those countries south in the Southwest Africa, even
Got
into
you.
the forest regions. These networks all connected back to um, the Moorish Empire in the north. So
I'm,
yeah,
I'm glad you answered that because people always associate when we say Moorish or more, they always say North Africa. They quick to say the region of North Africa, and they rely upon a particular look, aesthetic look.
mm,
'Cause they be like, what they see today. They're like the Moors were not dark as you're portraying, as you depict,
right.
you know, as you present, and I'm glad you put that in context, man, because there are people out there that tend to, if you tell me you're Moorish American, they be like, but you have no ties to Morocco. They just thinking geographically, not understanding, as you put it, politically, based on dynasty and other concepts of that.
Trade networks,
Yeah,
Sufi schools,
yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
all of the the Sufi brotherhoods in West Africa. We talk about Tijaniya, that
Hmm.
comes from Morocco. The Qadriya, that
Yeah,
comes from like Persia, Baghdad area. But it was all a part of, again, the same Islamic network.
got you.
Muradiya by was started in Senegal. But again, all of these different Sufi networks tied, the Sufi networks, the trade networks, the book exchange, and all of that. It tied the region together, right? And it was tied in layers. So, like on the surface, it may look like, right, the Moors are these quote unquote lighter skinned North Africans. But when we
Hmm.
get into like the actual tribal history and understand, okay, who were actually um, participating during these empires. Like, who ruled the Almoravid Empire? Well, if you
Yeah.
understand who ruled the Almoravid Empire, you would know that it was the Lamtuna, who was a sub tribe of the Sanhaja. The Sanhaja were always further south than other so called Berber tribes. They were in modern day southern Mauritania and northern Senegal, right? And they had connections to, right, who we call today the Tuareg. The Tuareg has connections to the Fulani. The Fulani has
Yeah.
connections with the Sonic. The Sonic has
Mhm.
connections to all the other Mande speaking peoples and the Khan peoples and the Hausa. And Hausa has Zongo communities in Ghana. So it's just like, if you look at it as a whole, you won't see it. So this is why like a lot of surface level scholarship prevails. But when you go beneath the surface and look at it in layers, you will see that each section of West Africa, there's a relationship with the previous layer as you go by region. So you got the coastal areas of North Africa, then you got
Mhm.
the mountainous regions. Then from the mountainous regions, you get into the desert. Then from the desert, you get into the Sahel. So from the Sahel to the savannah, from the savannah to
Mm.
the forest,
It's in
right?
layers.
There's layers to the different environments. So then now the local cultures starts to fit the environment, but the
Mhm.
system of how like their relationship with God and how they live off the land and how they build architecture and all these different things, it's very similar because
So
they
the
all
framework the
back.
framework stays in place. It's just the players change. That's basically it.
The framework stays in place, but the environment shapes the place and how they change.
I got you, my brother. Thank you, man. You got you got more slides
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
show?
But you guys questions, we just go.
We can go back and forth, yeah, because but stay on the slides though, because presentation is dope. I like it.
Yes, sir.
Um, in the term of like artifacts and historical pieces, right?
Uh,
Have any Moorish like coins or tools been discovered in the Americas?
okay, so that is a interesting question. We
Hmm.
understand that there have been certain things that has been found in the Americas alluding to a Moorish presence,
Hmm.
but because of Western academia's way of looking at the evidence, right?
Hmm.
Certain things get classified as forgeries or
Mm.
fake or that doesn't make sense, or you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, you know, lore and evidence if we look at it from outside of the Western academia's perspective. So
Mm.
things like what they call the Bat Creek inscription, things like the Born Stone, things like the Brazil tablets, or the
Mm-hmm.
uh, or Venezuelan rock art. Like there's a lot of different things that could point to the evidence of prior to a Moorish presence in the Americas prior to European colonialism. However, they go against the narrative that mainstream Western academia is laying out. But what I will say is that what has been confirmed, right, by Western mainstream academia is,
Mm.
right, the Vikings in Newfoundland,
Okay. All
like
right.
like Canada area,
Mm-hmm.
and then South American people trading sweet potato with people from the Polynesian islands prior to Columbus. These are things that
Mm.
they have admitted. So even in their system, you have Vikings and Polynesians, coming before Columbus, right? Now, understanding that, the biggest, the most famous example that people usually point to as proof of, Moors, Africans, Muslims in America before Columbus is, um, you know, the predecessor to Mansa Musa, right? And how
Okay.
he came with 2,000 ships and things like that. So, Ivan Van Sertima put a lot of work into like um, bringing back up the connections
Yeah.
between like the Mande language and the language in amongst the Maya and the Aztecs and things like that. There's
Mm.
also been just even understanding like the purpose of mound building. You have the cliff dwellings that is in like the four corner regions being similar to like Dogon cliff dwellings. Like there's a lot of different things that we could point to, but that's a whole nother presentation that we can do, and I can go deeper on.
No doubt. No doubt. And let's give a shout out to Ivory Certimer, the elder. I
Yes,
brought a lot of information to our people, man, with some great books that he has written. And I don't think I don't think people understand how important these scholars were for our time, from John Henry Clark, Ivor Van Sertima, and Dr. Ben Yokin.
hundred
I'm
percent.
saying it correctly. These people were these men were very vital and pivotal in our search for knowledge of self and knowing our history, controlling our narratives as well. So peace to them all. Um, how did the Moorish maritime knowledge develop, though?
How the Moorish maritime knowledge developed? Well, because of trade,
Mm-hmm.
um, understanding that. So as we're looking at, as it's shown on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
um, within like the first 100 200 years of Islam spreading, you
Mm-hmm.
have in Baghdad what they call the House of Wisdom.
Yeah.
And at the House of Wisdom, you had basically Muslims, Persians, people from India, Nestorian Christians,
Mm-hmm.
who are like basically Christians who weren't following the Roman Church at that time.
Mm-hmm.
They all came um, and were basically um, translating books and stuff in Arabic in Baghdad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, what sparked the golden age of Islam was different cultures coming together to share knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So then that created the intellectual culture of Islam. So this is where you get the development of the astrolabe, right? The development of the quadrant. These are navigational tools that use the sun and the stars for navigators to locate their position and know what direction that they're going, right? And then that also played into cartographical, so maps, which then that also played into sociological. So with the maps, right, the maps will have, okay, who's where and what to trade with them, and what you get back and what you give them. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
all of that knowledge became normalized in the Islamic world. Right. Uh, so with that being said, you had a history of this now going on for again, about 800 years. So as now the Spanish and the Portuguese, as they're now taking over the southern part of the peninsula, they now get access to the seas to now then apply the knowledge that has been given to them through the transfer of power of the capitulation of Granada.
Got you. That's peace right there. That's a lot of information right there. It's a lot to unpack, man. An hour's not enough, but
Yeah,
but
it's,
it's so layered, man. It's so intricate, and it's the little
yeah.
things that we don't pay attention to. We be like, oh man, that makes sense.
It's the nuances. It's really
Exactly.
it's really the nuances and the details that
Exactly.
because it's like and this is like studying over the years, right? You hear about the Moors, you
Hmm.
hear how great they were, and you
Yeah.
hear what they did, but we don't necessarily hear how it happened, what was needed for certain things to happen, and the details of how things were carried out, right? And I think that's the biggest inheritance that we've been given is that now we are now reconnected back to the intellectual property of our ancestors.
Yeah, hold on to that. That's peace right there. We're gonna hold on to that.
Yes, sir.
We'll get back on that because I want to get more into what we see on the screen. The
Yes, sir.
Iberian Crucible, a multicultural hub of knowledge and interaction in Al-Andalus history.
Yeah, our Andalus history.
And
All right.
Andalus. All right, got you. Thank
So
you.
in our Andalus during the Umayyad Caliphate, you had what they called the La Convivencia, the great coexistence between
Hmm.
Muslims, Jews, and Christians.
Hmm.
This is a very peaceful time uh, in Iberia, and even Muslim rulers were using Jews, Christians, and even some Muslims to extend trade to the rest of Europe, into
Hmm.
Germany, into France, into England and places like that.
Yeah.
So this period is a time period that we can look at in history and understand that hey, Muslims, Jews, and Christians can work together and work together on something important as science, right? So
Yep.
this became also during this time period you have popes coming to our Andalus to be educated, right? So
Mm.
like this is how deep, like again, like how people come to America, go to Harvard, go to Yale to get the best education in the world.
Yep.
This is how Moorish Spain was at that time. They would go to, right, moving to the
Mm.
second point, to the schools in Cordoba, in Toledo, right?
Hmm.
And then this is now that hub became a hub for translating all of this stuff from Arabic back into Latin.
Yep.
That you get now the medieval Latin scholars like Roger Bacon and Thomas Aquinas and things like that.
Hmm.
Right. And then, of course, through this, right, you get a multilingual society. So I would say 1,000 years ago, you probably would have had more Muslims who knew or understood the Bible than Christians
I believe so. Yeah.
because of the policy of the Catholic Church was to, reading was only for the priests,
Yep.
right? So a lot of their population was illiterate. But in Moorish Moorish civilizations, Moorish cities and states, right, education was encouraged, right? So having books was the flex. Like it was one Moorish caliph, the son of Abdul Rahman III. He had
Hmm.
over 500,000 books. The brother had over 500,000 books. So it's just like that was the flex to them at that time, right? So all of that, you know, when we say the crucible, all of that was able to be because of the tolerance of the Moors, right? And it's honestly what eventually became their downfall due to some factors, right? But it was
Hold on. Repeat that again. Repeat. I want people to understand that because it still shows to this day that we, no matter what you call yourself, whether Caribbean, African, so-called Black American, FBA, more,
mhm,
that compassion that we have
yeah,
is a double-edged sword.
right.
You got you got to go back. No, for real. You got to go back and
Yeah,
repeat that again, man. You got
yeah,
to go.
it was, yes, sir. It was the tolerance
Mhm.
of the convivencia, the coexistence, right? To where we could all tolerate one another, and everybody could practice their religion freely, is what made the golden age of Islam what it was. It wasn't until relations got hardened and distrustful, and honestly, uh, like Muslim and Christians coming together to fight Christians, and Christians and Muslims coming together to fight Muslims. It was a lot of blurred lines after this period of time that eventually led to the downfall of the Moors in Spain. So, because tolerance started to erode, it made it difficult for Moors to sustain what they were building in Andalusia.
Oh man, it sounds like the same story that we heard what took place in ancient Kemet.
Yeah,
After they learned, they were civilized, educated, because Egypt, Kemet had the best universities,
yeah,
instructed them, guided them, showed them how to be civil, how to
yeah.
work with nature, and in return, what they did was burn down the library. So they say.
Hmm.
They just moved your book somewhere else. I don't think they just physically burned it, but I think they got the books out, all the texts and whatever they needed, and they just took it with them back home.
Noble Jew Ali has a Moorish literature article. It's called
Mhm,
the Moorish or Moors costume ball, and
mhm,
then he talks about how it was the Moors who came in and saved the records when it was the
mhm,
norm for despotic soldiers to basically burn down libraries,
mhm,
right? So this concept of George G.M. James talking about the Moors are the custodians of the ancient Egyptian knowledge. Like, this
mhm,
is a real event that a lot of, again, I think I talked about this on another show with Brother Ron, but the last pharaoh of Egypt, daughter, married the king of Mauritania.
mm.
Cleopatra Selene married King Juba, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so
Wow.
that's an actual marriage when we're talking about preserving Egyptian culture. So like this isn't like something like George G. M. James is making up. The knowledge of ancient Egypt was preserved by Northwest and Southwest Africans.
Mm. Got you, brother. You got more in the slide to present, or
Yes, sir. Yeah, I got a
yeah?
couple slides,
Now
but
go ahead, do your
let me
thing, man.
know. We need to pause it too.
No, we good, man.
Yes,
I'm letting I'm asking questions here and there, but I'm just taking in all this information that you got, man, and it's always
yes,
refreshing to hear something like different perspective from we had many Moors coming on shows, and some deal with the law, some are civic Moors, some are quote unquote some are I don't want to disrespect them, but they say they sovereign citizen Moors.
yeah,
Don't crucify me, people, for saying this, forgive me.
yeah,
And you have your religious Moors
yeah,
that just teach you the concept of self creed, nationality, and sovereignty of self and XYZ. So to hear you're touching on parts in history where some tend to overlook,
yeah.
and by you telling us the history, these little intricate things that we don't hear in our educational systems,
Mhm.
it it paints the picture. So you're appreciated for that. You may continue, brother.
Thank you, brother. And I think it's important. And I think that what you're saying is a lot of differences within the conscious community in general are ideological,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when we start to really, present our history in this way, now we can make the focus historical because
Definitely.
you can't argue against the records. You can't
Mm-hmm.
you can't really argue. This is what happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? But theorizing on what should be, right, and arguing over perspectives versus building on what's been left to us.
Exactly.
And I think this is where things are headed um, with the entire conscious community because
Gotcha.
again, more and more records are being uncovered each and every day.
Definitely. Definitely. And before you go any further, I'm gonna ask you just one question.
Yes, sir.
How does this this history ideology intersect with the Afrocentric history? Because you may have some people that be like, all right, this sounds great, but I'm black. I hear more stuff like, aesthetically, yeah, you say they look like us, but I don't go by that. I love being called black.
Well, understanding that it's the source
Hmm.
and historical case study of what Pan Africanism can be, right? So
Yeah.
again, honestly, prior to the European colonial expansion, the best case study that we can look to for some semblance of Pan Africanism within the last 1,000 years, right?
Hmm.
It would be through the Islamic network. It would be through the Moorish Empire.
Mm.
It would be through the Moorish network because you would have again, right? Sanhaja, Masmuda, Sonique, Mende, Fulani, Wolof, Yoruba, Akan, right? Jukan, Nupe,
Hmm.
right? You typically wouldn't have a Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay said this, right? You typically wouldn't have somebody that's Hausa join the Yoruba spiritual system, right?
Hmm.
But you would have a Yoruba and Hausa Muslim. And now through Islam, Islam becomes a third party to strengthen connections between two different parties, two different tribes. Right. So the importance of understanding this history is to see, like, okay, how did we work together prior to European colonialism? What connections did we have together prior to European colonialism? And especially important for us here in America is because if each and every one of us do a DNA test, you're gonna get a varying degrees of different percentages from several different West African countries.
That's a fact. That's
Right.
a fact.
So if we are the mosaic of several different West African countries, well, what were their connection prior to? We should be the
Mm.
ones to reconstruct that because we are the ones who are descendant of that. Everybody else are just like, hardline Yoruba, hardline Mande. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Hardline Dahomey or Fawn, right?
Yeah.
But it is us that is mixed with several different ethnic groups. So it is upon us to always find the civilizational continuity of where different tribes and cultures were in the melting pot. That's who
So
we are.
so that's why many groups stick to that the ideology of nationality over color. Like
Yeah,
we have some people be like, no, I'm not black, man.
yeah,
I'm from the Bahamas. I'm Haitian. I'm Dominican.
exactly.
I'm from Uganda or whatsoever. I'm not black. And some people would take it out of context, like as if you're being prejudiced or xenophobia because I'm Black American, and through studying, I'm like, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're being prejudiced.
Right.
Sorry about that.
You good.
They just taking pride in their nationality because nationality ties you back to a nation of sovereignty, landmass, culture, and identity.
Right.
Not just calling me black.
Right. They're working with a different framework of identity and self
Got you. Damn my
because
throat.
they know
Yeah,
the origins. Right. And this is
yeah,
why this is the time for us as a people, is because prior to, if you really wanted to know the origins of who we are, you gotta go
yeah.
to the library. You got to study for hours. We didn't have no internet, right? So how many Asiatics, on top of trying to survive, how many Asiatics was going to the library doing all of this research? Well, it was your John Henry Clarks, it was your Ivan Van Sertima's, it was your
Yep.
Jose Pimenta Bays, it was your Dr. Benz, right?
Mhm.
Everything, really everything that came from the conscious community in the 90s was built off of what they did in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s. You know what I'm saying?
That's powerful. So right now we at this slide, so 1492, a new beginning.
Right.
Let's crack into that, brother.
So yeah, again, we just gave a background on what was Moorish Spain like, Moorish Andalusia like prior to
Mhm.
1492. So that was a component of La Convivencia, Muslim, Jewish, Christian connection and collaboration, right? Then we
Mhm.
also had, of course, the network of agriculture, hydraulic technology, navigational tools, things like that. So all of that is the background, the foreground, the system for what was to come after 1492. So 1492, get the fall of Granada, the Alhambra decree expelling the Jews, followed by forced conversion of the Muslims, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
now Moors become Moriscos, Muslims forced to convert to Christianity. Jews become conversos or Moranos, Jews forced to convert. Old Christians, those with no Jewish or Muslim ancestries, they hold the social power now, right? So
Mhm.
this is when, and I'm probably gonna say this in another slide, probably gonna talk more about it. This is where the limpianza de sangre come from, pure bloodness, right? So back then, if you were pure blooded, you had old Christian blood that was didn't have no admixture of Jewish or Muslim ancestry, right?
Oh wow.
So, with that being said, um, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was like a straight down the line, darker skinned people versus lighter skinned people type of thing, right? Because what's not accounted for is that prior to Moorish power declining in the Iberian Peninsula, there were a lot of different marriages and stuff that were going on, right? So
Mm.
you would have right old Christians, but their people married Moorish women, right? Or had a Moorish husband or something like that. That doesn't necessarily mean old Christians themselves didn't have right, you know, melanated ancestry within them. But what it means is this is the start of where they're trying to separate, right? This is where racism. This is basically the soil from which racism grows out of. Right?
I got you.
Yeah. So
I forgot what was the individual's name that started it. It came during the the Inquisition.
Inquisition, yeah. I believe it's Cardinal. His name was like Cardinal Jimenez or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
The Inquisitor General.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So like I
so
tell people all the time, if you want to understand uh, the roots of racism, you have to understand the Reconquista,
yeah,
the Papal Bulls, and the Inquisition. You have to
yeah,
understand these things in order to really get modern racism because it's the soil, it's the root from which racism grows out of.
I got you. So this new world, this new beginning in 1492,
Mhm.
it consisted of what, like expelled Moors after they lost the whole of Granada, the last whole.
So this is where the split comes in the Moorish world, right? You have Moors that leave Andalusia, right,
Mm-hmm.
and they go to other places in Europe. They go to Africa. Some come to the Americas. We're gonna get to that later. Then
Mm.
you have those who stay and just become Christians outwardly, but internally they're Muslim or Jewish. So then now, so these covert Muslim and Jews now they become the engine for the empire.
Okay.
So this is what I was saying because they still had the technical, logistical knowledge that was needed for Spain and Portugal to expand.
Yeah.
Right? So 1492 isn't the end of Islamic Iberia; it's a transformation. The system didn't disappear; it went underground. Overnight, millions of people had to hide their heritage, their practices, and their beliefs. They became experts in a new skill, survival through concealment. Right? I think another slide is going to touch on this, but like this is like the origin of like code switching.
Yeah, I see that. No, trust me, I I
you
get
know,
it.
this is where we first, as a people, first started to really code switch in the modern era.
Mm, I got you.
Right? So crypto identity, and this picture here. This is actually from a real drawing, a real contemporary drawing of like the 16th century, I believe. Right. So it's crypto identity, the complex dynamics of identity preservation under social suspicion and scrutiny. outward expressions of Christianity, private customs and practice, social dynamics of suspicion,
Mm-hmm.
adaptation for survival, mastery of code switching, resilience through layered identities. Right. So I believe it's called the Oran Fatwa, and it was basically a law ruling given by a Moorish sultan from Morocco, telling the the forcibly newly converted Catholics who used to be Muslims in Spain, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, outwardly do this, pray with your eyes, secretly go at night to do wudu. You feel what I'm saying? Like, basically
Yeah,
giving them the, the laws on how to code switch, right,
exactly.
and where they're at. So again, this crypto identity, right, basically becomes the depending on how much money you had prior to the fall, you either became a financier
Mm-hmm.
or a merchant, etc., under the new ways. So I think the next couple of slides going to talk about
I got you. Yo, that crypto, that concept, the idea that they had to live by to do practices, they had to disguise their practices makes sense because now I'm looking at the African traditional spiritual practices.
that.
We had to hide every spirit under every Catholic saint. Like
Yes.
this
So
saint represent that. Yo,
yeah.
oh my God, this thing is making so much
Mo,
like we already know it, but now it's like wow, the
check
more
this out. To that
yeah.
point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the Moors were the first ones enslaved, these are the first ones to now put their religion under a guise under
Yep.
Catholicism, right? How then do the other Africans, you see, learn how to do what they do?
Yeah,
Because now
bro.
they're coming into this, you see what I'm saying? Into this
Mm-hmm.
network where the Moors are the first example of how to survive in this new world,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So this is the connection. So to this point, class survival,
Yeah.
economic disparities influence identities and survival strategies within Atlantic system. So wealthy converso merchants thrive in trade networks. Skilled Morisco artisans preserve cultural practices, and vulnerable poor
Mm-hmm.
converts face social exclusion and hardship. Right. So depending on how
Yeah.
much money you had, determine what your status is going to be now that Spain and Portugal is now ruling.
Oh, the class system, the caste system.
Right.
There it goes.
Exactly. So it's like now on real time we can see like, okay, why do some people stay and convert? Why do others leave?
Mm.
Right. So we know in real time. See, the thing is, it's like, there's this whole thing in the conscious community and the internet squirreling, like the more it's sold out, right?
I heard that before.
Not really understanding the nuances and dynamics of what was going on. Because you did have Moors working for Spain and Portugal, and then you also have Moors who was jacking Spain and Portugal's boats.
Yeah.
You feel what
Pirate.
I'm saying? So it was on both ends.
Yeah. Yeah. We were the original pirates. I heard the stories about that, like just catching them, intercepting those ships.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, that's crazy, man.
So the contradiction now, right?
Mhm.
Here's the contradiction. So the empire's policies of distrust versus its reliance on conversos and interpreters, right? The limpieza de sangre laws, reliance on conversos for administration, use of interpreters in trade and diplomacy, right? So on one end, right, they're trying to, strip away as much as they can to these newly converted Jews and Muslims. But on another end, they need them. There's a necessity for them to expand their empire. So
Mm.
Spain and Portugal is now stuck in a conundrum, right? So what we have is the image versus reality, where Spain claims to be a unified Catholic monarchy. However, that's still Moorish influence. So they're still using Moorish architecture,
That's a
music,
fact.
agricultural techniques, and even the Spanish language are saturated with Arabic influence. I believe in the golden age of the Moor, they talk about how a song that a Moor made, like maybe in the 1100s or the 1200s, eventually became the national anthem for Spain.
Oh man.
Right. So
I
it's
heard,
like, you see what I'm saying? What I'm saying, like,
yeah.
it's the hidden network of the knowledge and the culture and the customs of the Moors just got transferred over to the rising power of Spain and Portugal. And they
Of
just
course.
like, put it in their own way, but they're still using the core of the knowledge and the network.
No, exactly, because I know about I know about the architecture like that
Yeah,
they call cathedral or Catholic churches were
yeah.
actually mosque. They were Islamic mosque. They were,
They're
you know.
Islamic mosques, and they were built by what they call mudehars, which were
Hmm.
basically Muslims that were forced to convert or converted to Christianity prior to 1492. Right.
Mm,
So England, who opposed Spain, framed itself as a Protestant anti-Spanish empire. Right. So
mm,
they allied with Morocco, Queen Elizabeth and James the Fourth. First, they forged alliances with Moroccan sultans, traded English arms and timber for Moroccan sugar and saltpeter. English privateers like the Barbary Corsairs operated with Moroccan support.
mm,
Now, religion was branded, power was practical. Spain projected an image of Catholic purity, yet its culture was profoundly Moorish. England's identity was built on opposing Spain, yet it eagerly partnered with the very Moors Spain was trying to expel. Right?
mhm,
So the Catholics are saying we're this pure Catholic nation. However, a lot of their culture is still Moorish. Then
yeah,
Spain, then England is like, we not Catholics. The Catholics, the Spain is basically still a Moorish, you know, country, civilization. But whole time they're working with the Moors as well to get over on Spain. So they trying to dog each other about working with Moors while still working with Moors.
and then they use our energy. So
Exactly.
so I have heard this before. Like, I mentioned this many moons ago on this platform that they say the American legal system
Hmm.
somehow has some Islamic influence on it.
Yeah.
And they even say something within the Capitol building that you see some Islamic insignias in the certain parts that represents the law here. Like, some like although they say America's a Christian based country,
Yeah.
some of the principles are built on Islamic structure. Is that true?
So when we look at it from a pure like structure and similarity of idea, yes. Right.
Okay.
So like I was just saying, right, during the La Convivencia era, Jews, Muslims, Christians were able to practice their religion freely.
Hmm.
What's the First Amendment? Freedom of religion here in America,
Exactly.
right? So the ability to practice your religion freely in a country is something is a concept that goes back to Moorish Spain,
Mm.
right? So when we start to look at some of the concepts of American law, we can find that these same concepts existed when the Moors were ruling. So that's what they really mean when they're saying
Got you.
that. Yeah.
Got you. So I only ask that because I find it like hypocritically confusing and alarming. Like whenever there's something that goes bump, it's an attack on Islam. They don't make the distinguishment to say maybe it's fanatics of a
Right.
particular group. They just automatically say Islam. Like, like even like the jokes you hear, you tell a black person that you're Muslim, it's like you don't eat pork because they see the image of the militancy and all that, but they don't like
Mhm.
some respect it, some don't. It's like it's always some kind of backlash.
That's and what we call that is a successful propaganda campaign.
Exactly.
Honestly, to deter people from studying and looking more into Islam. But how successful really is it in this modern day? More and more of our people are becoming Muslim, even if they don't have no awareness of what the Moorish Science Temple of America is. But it's like I'm seeing on my timeline more Muslims and more people talking about Islam than ever before.
Hmm.
Right? People that I grew up with that's, Muslims now reaching out to me for, advice on certain things. So it's just like, even though they ran this propaganda against us as early as, as late as 2001,
Yeah.
it's really not, it really has, working in some senses,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh man. You want to continue with the slide, or you want me to ask another question?
If you got another question, we can go there too.
Oh, all right, let's go into this. Then I ask a question,
That's
brother.
it. So what we have here is the Morisco expulsion. The official expulsion led to continued movement and cultural assimilation in the Americas. So Moors were expelled. Noble Drew Ali talks about this all the time. I believe it's a Moorish historical message to America. He talks
Mhm.
about the Moors being expelled from Spain in 1610, right?
Okay.
Um, and that once the Moors were expelled from Spain, a lot of industries in Spain went into decay, right?
Of course.
Right, because we were the economic engine
Hmm.
of agriculture and finance and all the different things needed to sustain an empire. So, from 1609 to 1614, expulsions occurred, forced migration to various colonies, assimilation into local cultures, persistence of knowledge systems despite expulsion, and continued influence in new environments. All right, so think about this time period, this time frame, 1609 to 1614. Right, a lot of our people are familiar with the famous date of 1619. Right, so around this time, the early 17th century, Spain is now, after expelling the Moors, are now about to start their decline. And
Hmm.
then, as these Moors who are being expelled from Spain now officially, as they start to go to other places, now you see the rise of these other European nations.
Got you. I
You want to
got
ask a
you.
question before we go to the next slide?
Now do your thing. Do your thing. Now, go ahead. I got a question after. Let you do your thing, man. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah. So this then creates the hidden layer, right? The diverse crypto populations and communities within the Atlantic system, right? So crypto populations of Moriscos, conversos, and their descendants navigating the Atlantic world. Then you have African Muslims, enslaved and free individuals from the Sahel and West Africa, bringing sophisticated knowledge of Islam, literacy in Arabic, and agriculture expertise. You have the traders and the settlers, a multi ethnic class of maritime workers who operated in the spaces between empires. They have, maroon villages and things like that, communities of escaped Africans who form
Yeah.
independent societies, often incorporating indigenous and even European fugitives. And this
Hmm.
is the system. This is the system beneath the system. So if you imagine an empire as a highway, this is the network of back roads, footpaths, and underground tunnels that ran beneath it, connecting
Yep.
people across the very boundaries the empires tried to enforce. All right. So between the crypto populations, the African Muslims, the traders, the sailors, and the Maroons, right? Again, the last Seminole War was like 1859, 6 years before the Civil War, right?
Yep.
So depending on where you were at and which empire you were aligned with, right? Some of us were enslaved, some of us were fighting back, some of us had our own autonomous communities, some of us were, in the military for different colonies. Like it depending on your situation, you
Hmm.
were in you were in a different circumstance, right? Because again, the knowledge, the network of knowledge that we've been discussing prior to the rise of Spain and Portugal, that these African Muslims and crypto populations were still a commodity for the economic engine for these European empires. Come on, charge on the laptop real quick.
Nah, you good. You good, brother. You may continue. Don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe, my people. We got super chat as I mentioned before. This is a great show. When you view it, run up the likes, share it. Pay respects to the brother because he's doing a great job with this presentation. There are a lot of things, information that he's dropping, and once you intake all this information, you will begin to connect the dots, and you will see that there's a story behind the story behind the story. It's like a Russian doll. The deeper you go, you get to the core of it. You be like, okay, this is why this thing was put in place, why it functions that way. These ideas and concepts. Go ahead, brother.
Yes, sir. So the next point is um, the maritime mixing zone. At sea, identities blended seamlessly as diverse skills and expertise became paramount. Multiple cultures interacted, creating a unique environment where collaboration shapes maritime practices and
Yep.
opportunities arose. So, a hidden layer is that, like, of course, mixing happened on land,
Hmm.
but a greater mixing and syncretism happened at sea. So this is where you see like a lot of English people and Europeans, they start converting to becoming Muslims, like these privateer and pirate networks.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them become Muslim, or some Muslims end up becoming Christian. Like depending on again where you were at,
Where you at? Yeah, the
a lot of
influence.
syncretism and mixing that was happening. But when you think about it, right, at sea, it's kind of more necessary because it's like y'all just got y'all on this boat,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
we.
in the middle of the ocean. So you start to see on the ships the laws that were enforced on the land didn't really carry over on the sea, right? So, these people care less about the blood purity and more about whether you can handle a sail, navigate a coastline, translate a language. Skills
Mm-hmm.
mattered more than labels during this time, right? So, a lot of crews would have West Africans, it would have crypto people, it would have Andalusians, it would have Portuguese people, it would even have some indigenous people. So, depending on, your expertise, that was more valued than who you were, you know, what your quote unquote race were.
Got you. I'm gonna ask a question.
Yes, sir.
One last question before we jump out of here about our indigenous family.
Yes.
Were there any parallels between Moorish spirituality and indigenous beliefs?
Yes. I would say, and I was talking to this about to my holiday to my mission to me here in Denver, Colorado. A big parallel is religious symbology,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the circle seven, right?
Mm-hmm.
The circle seven, the symbol of the circle seven in Nobu Ali, is given to Moors, right? It's a symbol of perfected men, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perfected man, right? So just going through what the lessons say. Perfected man is the human spirit made in the human spirit clothed with soul made in the form of Allah, right? That's the higher self.
Yeah.
So the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America says that, right, the sun is not Allah, but it is Allah's most noblest image. Then in another chapter it talks about how our soul is the image of him who gave it.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, man, basically that the circle seven, even though it's a symbol of the perfected man, it's really a symbol of the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the sun being the light, being the purity, being the things that help things grow and bring warmth to the world, right? We as men and women should strive to, be the image of light, right? So that's that circle and cross image is seen in Africa, in the Congo cosmogram, and
Mm-hmm.
the Tuareg cross is seen throughout West Africa. And then you have the same circle and cross symbol in the Americas, but they just call it the medicine wheel, as
Yeah.
well as you have different circle and cross symbols in the Southeast ceremonial complex, Etowah Mounds, Mound Bills, and Alabama, and things like that. So I would say one of the biggest interesting connection of symbols and parallels is the sun cross symbol in Africa and in the Americas, which is symbolic of the circle seven.
That's peace right there, brother. Yo, I want to say thank you very much, man. I
Yes.
appreciate you, man, for coming out, for dropping all this information. And again, people, you cannot get it in all in one sitting. It
Okay.
takes time, as he says, and years of studying. Um, give us 3 books before we check out of here that where people can start from to get their
So,
research.
based on this lecture, 3 books that I will want you to get.
Mhm.
It's let me pull it up. Actually, I would say you would want to get
Look at me, I'm taking notes as well.
Jane Landers. So Jane Landers, she has a book. No, actually, Caroline Cook. Her book is called Forbidden Passages:
Mhm.
Muslims and Moriscos in Colonial Spanish America. Caroline P. Cook, right? So in her book, she goes in on how uh, Moors were passing as Christians to secretly come to the Americas. How the Mexican Inquisition were basically finding people who were either, Muslimicizing or Judaizing, court
Hmm.
cases that were brought upon people during the Inquisition
Yeah.
of their Moorish identity or Jewish identity. So that's a
Okay.
good book, Forbidden Passages by Caroline Cook. Uh,
Okay.
you also have, I think it's called Muslims and Jews, Jews and Muslims in Early British Colonial America by Daniel Yates or Yates. That's a popular book in the community.
Hmm.
Um, Another good book is, if you want to look at, um, Servants of Allah by Sylvian Joff. Servants of Allah is another good book because she breaks down the African Muslim perspective of the transatlantic slave trade. And she made some beautiful discoveries on how blues and jazz comes from the Islamic imprint on African American culture. She even put a video. I posted it on Facebook and Instagram before, but she plays a blues song that was used on a chain game called Levy Camp Holland, and she played the Don. She played these two things back to back, and the melodic uh, framework of the song Levy Cap Holla was the same melody of the Don. Like it literally sounds the exact same. Right? So it's like
Yeah.
she she's she put some heat out there. So I would say
Yeah.
those three books right
I appreciate that. I'm definitely gonna check that out. I got so many books I'm still digesting right now. I'm more on the mental side. I'm taking things in, and then some esoteric teachings as well. I like to have a show about the esoteric teachings of the Moors, what the Moors prescribed,
there.
um,
Definitely.
gave to Europe. We could get into the Templars' history against Islam and everything else. We definitely gonna touch into that.
Bro,
Um,
we can take it everywhere, man, because it's just like it's all connected. The history, the
yeah,
esoteric, the application of today, like it's
it's
all
all connected.
yeah.
Definitely. Your brother Morio Smith L, brother. I appreciate you, man. Much
I
blessings to
appreciate
you
you
and your
too, brother.
family, man.
Yes, sir.
To our listeners, go out there, support what the brother's doing. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I got a
Encourage
book
us.
that dropped.
You got a book, yeah. Go ahead, tell us about the
Yeah,
book, brother.
it's called "The Missing Piece to the Puzzle:
Missing piece of the puzzle.
Unbroken History and Prophecies for the Future for Moorish Americans."
Do me a favor, brother. When we
Yes, sir.
put this video up, you're gonna text me that link, man, so I can put it in the description for the people to find.
Will do. Will do. Yes,
Definitely,
sir.
man. To our family out there, our listeners and our viewers, don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe. We got super chats, show love, run up the likes on these videos. We got more coming out. Support us. Find our handles on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Show love to NYP. Show love to Morio Smith L. With that
Mario,
being said, Moriel Smith L. Apologies for that. Thank you.
I'm good.
With that being said, family, we are out. Peace.
Peace and love.
Peace.